Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Carrie McKinnon with the Solvang Library, and we are thrilled to be starting our fourth annual Ghost Story Challenge final reading and winners announcement. Welcome, everyone who is watching. And the first thing I want to say is that I was amazed at all the entries we got this year. We got 63 teen entries and quite a few adult entries also. And they were all fantastic. And while not everyone is getting acknowledged online here as a quote unquote winner, everyone is really truly a winner for your creativity and for participating. And I want to say that every story that was submitted will be published. I'll be putting a link together, hopefully by the end of the day tomorrow, as soon as I get them all formatted. So, we could not have done this event without the help of some professional writers, our judging panel, and I want to introduce them. One of them is supposed to join us live, but I'm not quite sure he's here yet. When he comes, I'll pop him in. Oh, there he is. Great. I'm going to pop Jamie in here.
Oh, there I am.
Hi, Jamie Baker.
Hello.
All right. Great. So I'm going to introduce Jamie first since he's here live with us. And Jamie Baker is the owner of a business in Solvang, Space VR, the virtual reality place. I think you're sitting there right now and we can see it. It's a lot of fun. But Jamie also is a longtime author, a playwright, and the author of 2 novels. And I have a little picture of some of them. There we go. Oh, we have to take us out to look at this. Sorry, guys. I don't have an engineer today. And so that is Jamie. Jamie, thank you so much for reading a whole bunch of stories and being with us today.
I love. I said I loved it. It was wonderful.
Great, great. And Jamie's going to help us in reading some of the stories later today. I also want to tell you about our writer and judge, Ron Colon. Many of you may know him through his perspective column that appears weekly in the San Ynez Valley News, the Santa Maria Times, and the Lompoc Record. And Ron is also very involved in storytelling through being the co-producer of the acclaimed Tales from the Tavern concert series. He's a documentary filmmaker, and he's the executive director of the nonprofit Artist Advocacy Foundation. And Ron is not able to be here with us today, but we thank him so much for his assistance. And last but certainly not least, Gary Robinson was one of our judges, and Gary is an award-winning author and filmmaker of Choctaw and Cherokee descent who lives in San Ynez. And Gary has written many books, fiction and nonfiction, some for young adults that have to do with supernatural things, and some to do with Native American themes, and some books to do with also veterans issues. So Gary, thank you so much. He is a super busy guy, and so we're so glad that he started. Continue with the next story, which is a teen story, and it won the award for the best plot. And it's called The Hungry Household. And the author is Ashley Winifred. Congratulations, Winifred. And let me see how this sharing is going to do.
Once, my family was normal, just as theirs were. Mother and father went to work, I went to school, we watched television. We were normal. And we thought that house, that small house, third in on the left of Elm Street, was normal, just as they thought. Nothing extraordinary ever happened to me. The days rolled by. Mother and father must have been as bored as me when our whole lives moved across the country. I remember the first day at my family's forever home. I stepped onto that perfectly trimmed lawn with the dancing willow tree in front, with the rope swing hanging off the biggest branch being pushed by a ghost in the wind. The green front door was propped open and seemed hungry to have my family. When my mother told me to go get firewood from the corner store, I could do nothing but oblige. Walking through the neighborhood with every house an exact replica of my own, but the homes I walked by had no life. I could see people inside, but they were all gray. They had lost their will to live. When I got to the corner store, my mother swore it was open, no one was inside, and the lights were off, so I went home. I was exhausted. I remember how draining it was to walk down the street. It should not have been so tired. It was barely a quarter-mile walk, but the gentle wind blowing through my window and the continual clicking cuckoo clock was lulling me to sleep. Once asleep, I had no dreams. Being woken up by a scream was not something anybody liked. Jumping out of bed at the sound, I ran downstairs instinctively, just to see the cuckoo clock bird retreating back into its home. Satisfied that I must have heard the crazy bird, I went to look for my parents. It was only midnight and my parents were always up late. I looked all through downstairs and all through upstairs, not finding a single trace of my parents. That's when I saw it, the broken floorboards, right at the bottom of the stairs, right where I walked over. How had I not seen it? How had I not fallen into the hole? At the bottom of the hole I saw it, the rows and rows of broken teeth consuming my parents. Dead. My parents were dead. So easily the house took my parents, I could barely hear their struggles. Their goodbyes were lost to the belly of the beast. And I relived everything watching the new family moving their things in. Every house looked the same as it did when I moved in, and I could hear the same cuckoo clock ticking.
Great. Thank you so much, Winnie. Thanks for making that video and sending it in. So the next person who is going to read for his story for us is Dylan Shomes. And Dylan, there we go. Dylan is the runner-up. His story is the runner-up for the scariest teen story. And his story is called The Man. Take it away, Dylan. I'm going to pop out while you read.
Okay. I pull my bedsheets closer to my face, trying to hide, but I know it's pointless. My bedroom door creaks open and the man enters my room. He wears the same battered suit and tie every night. He has dark, empty holes where his eyes should be. His mouth is cruelly sewn shut, forever silenced. My heart races as he creeps over to my bedside. He reaches out his bony fist and places a crumpled piece of paper in my shaky hand. The man turns and disappears. No matter what I do or where I go, he always appears at 2:30 a.m. Trembling, I slowly open my hand to reveal the piece of paper. Smoothing it out, I read the scribbled words, "Tomorrow we work. Sleep well, friend." The next day, my thoughts drifted to the note. Friend, work, what work? My old friend John came over to my house for dinner, and we talked about old times. We hadn't seen each other in 10 years since I moved out of our hometown. After dinner, John turns to me and says, "Well, I'd better get going. Early flight." Out the front window, I notice the man standing in the street next to John's car. My heart races again. Why is he there? I ask myself. I turn to John. "I'll walk you out." As we approach the car, John doesn't seem to notice the man crouched down by the driver's door. Feeling helpless, I scream. The man lunges at John and drives a knife into his chest. The man stands there emotionless and stretches out his bony fist to me again. Another crumpled piece of paper. It says, "One friend." I bend over John as he lay dead on the ground and pull the knife from his chest. In a fit of blind rage, I plunge the knife through the man's battered suit. The man stands there and begins to fade away. His dead eyes and gross mouth disappeared in the dark. I hear blaring sirens. Confused, I sit down next to John and drop the bloody knife. Police pull into my driveway. They rush towards me. Guns out. My hands go up. "I have video evidence it wasn't me," I yell. They cuff me and take my phone to see my security camera videos. 2:30 a.m. I am alone and awake in my room, reaching out into the darkness. 6 p.m. John arrives at my house. 8:30 p.m. John and I walk to his car. 8:31 p.m. I stab John in the chest. The man isn't in any of the videos. "Is this some sort of joke?" the cops ask. "No. The man has no eyes, a battered suit, and his mouth is sewn shut," I said. How long have you been living here? One officer asks. About 10 years, I say. A man was murdered in this house in 1972. His eyes were gouged out and his mouth sewn shut.
Great job, Dylan. And that is indeed a scary story. Thank you so much. That was The Man by Dylan Shomes. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we have Jenna back. So Jenna is the runner-up for Scary Story this year. And Jenna, I'm going to get out of here and let you read it to us.
All right. You can hear me. All right. So hopefully you guys can hear me. I apologize. The internet's terrible here. So hopefully I don't get lost. All right. The Lady of the Slough. The Lady of the Slough. The Madrona. La Llorona. She had several names, but Audrey knew the ghost haunting the Black Lake wetlands was a mere myth. With a sigh, she shut the door of her car and pressed the locking mechanism, the flash of headlights illuminating the fog. It was past midnight, and her cameraman was late. With Halloween right around the corner, the local news station had decided to send her out into the swamp in the middle of the night to report on recent sightings of the White Lady. Yet another ridiculous name. Audrey whipped out her phone, ready to send James another text. Where was he? The child's cry was unexpected. Audrey froze. The sound crept forth again, a mournful, broken song muffled slightly by the choking fog. Closing out her messenger app, Audrey instead flipped on the flashlight function of her phone and pointed it towards the swamp below. Nothing but tangled willow branches and that impervious mist. Hello? She called out. Sob broke the stillness, followed by a faint help. Cursing her high heels, Audrey stepped off the road and pushed her way through the bushes. With the dark and the fog, it was nearly impossible to see anything, but she followed the child's weak murmurings like a hound on the scent. After several minutes, she paused, hoping to reorient herself. When a brush of icy air caressed her neck, she jerked around, only to catch sight of a large, compact shape creeping towards her. The light of her phone didn't reveal much, but she knew what she gazed upon wasn't human. When the thing closed the distance between them, a jaw and a bloated throat pulsating with dozens of red gashes engulfed her field of vision. The pallid monster drew in a rattling breath, then rose until it towered above her. Audrey gasped and fell to the ground. That swollen throat throbbed, the bloody gills vibrating as a variety of voices, male and female, young and old, filled the emptiness. Help! Oh my God, no! And latched onto Audrey's neck. Her scream was cut short as her throat tore away. Bright blood ran free, joining the black water of the slough below. Its meal could be savored later, but for now the creature reached up with several long, spindly fingers and extracted the new set of vocal cords it had collected. With its free claws, the monster sliced a new slit in its swollen throat, then deftly wove the strips of flesh in like a spider spinning a web. It stood and tested out its latest acquisition. The new blood-stained gill vibrated as Audrey's voice broke the silence. Don't be afraid. The end.
That was great, Jenna. Congratulations. That is a really creepy and original take on the La Llorona myth. Fantastic. All right. So let's see. I think that we have Samara Perez coming up. Samara, are you able to pop in here? Samara?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, and it's okay. I guess if your camera isn't working, you can just read your story. We would love it because the sound is good. All right. So Samara is the runner-up in the teen category for Writer's Craft, and her story is called Lights Out.
Okay. The gloomy sky and the intensifying sound of the thunder came roaring down. The moon hid in fright, and the clouds seemed to devour the sky. The empty streets and broken street lamps gave the little house on the second street a different look. It was darker, gloomier, and angrier. Lightning struck down every building in the neighborhood and brought a moment of fright to the people. The silence that followed was eerie, and the seemingly empty streets now had a visitor. The wind laughed with excitement as the little girl approached the stairs. She knocked on the door, and a lovely young lady greeted her. She was surprised to see a little girl at her doorstep so late at night. The yellow jacket and red boots fooled the young lady into believing that the little girl was harmless and in desperate need of help. Without thinking twice, the young lady asked the little girl to come in and seek shelter from the storm. She quickly reached for blankets and tried to comfort the little girl. "How are you, my dear? Where are your parents?" said the young lady. "I don't have parents, only my doll and I to make you company. My parents are dead, and I have no one to take care of me," cried the little girl. "Well, how did you end up here? I've never seen you in this neighborhood," replied the young lady. The little girl looked at her and replied with a sinister smile, "I've seen you before." In that instant, the lights in the room started to flicker. The wind began to howl louder as the little girl continued to stare at the young lady. The young lady laughed nervously and asked, "Oh, where?" The little girl whispered, "At the cemetery." "Oh, were you there visiting your parents?" said the young lady. "No, but I was standing right next to you while you were visiting yours," replied the little girl as she was patting her doll. She looked at the child in confusion. She didn't recall seeing anyone at the cemetery the last time she had visited. Suddenly, the young lady remembered seeing that little doll. It had been laid on top of the small grave not far from where her family rested. A moment later, the room got colder. The lady shivered, and the doll began to morph into something menacing. Its eyes enlarged, and the mouth got wider. With pure hunger, the doll continued to stare. The young lady grasped and, with a quivering voice, asked the little girl, "Where did you get that doll?" The little girl stood silently staring at the young lady. Before the young lady could exit the house, the doll and the little girl viciously attacked her. A couple days went by, and multiple flyers all around town affirmed the disappearance of the young lady. With the loss of the lady and the nights getting darker, both assassinators still lurk the town with hunger.
Wow, that was great. Congratulations, Samara. Thank you for reading that so well for us.
Thank you.
Great job. All right. So next we have Mr. Michael Patrick Jackson. And let me find you. Here you are, Mike. Mike's story, which is called Sally's Revenge, is another runner-up for Scariest Adult Story. So welcome, Mike.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, all right. Adrian straddled the old man, avoiding the blood pooling around his head. Searching the body, he removed a wallet, stuffing it into his belt pack. He scanned the parking lot. No one. This guy parked isolated to avoid door dents, but the dummy got a dent in his head instead. Adrian chuckled. A gold ring wouldn't move. Pulling harder, he removed it along with a strip of skin. Taking the watch last, it went into his pocket. He walked to where Larry was waiting. "Walk, don't run," he whispered to himself. They checked into a motel across the street. The two entered room 225, locked the door, and checked all windows closed, blinds shut. Sitting, Adrian tossed the wallet, ring, and watch on the bed. "I saw the old man flash some serious money inside the sports store, so I bought a baseball bat and followed him outside. Next to his car, I showed him my wallet, telling him I found it on the ground and thought it was his. While the sucker was checking to see if he still had his own wallet, I whipped the bat out of the bag and hit him good." Larry was counting. "That's $2,064 in cash, maybe $100 for the ring, and $20 for the watch. We can split this town now, maybe go to San Diego." Adrian wrinkled his nose. "Hey, what's that smell?" "Smells like dog puke mixed with dead rat guts. It's getting worse." said Larry. He pointed at the closet. It's coming from there. Adrian opened the door, gasped, and stumbled back. There was a woman hanging from an extension cord wrapped around her neck. Her face was bluish and engorged, the eyes open, staring, with brownish red flecks covering the whites of her eyes. Her tongue was sticking out, purple and bloated. The woman's dress bottom had dark stains. Fluid was dripping from the dress to a stinking puddle beneath her. What the hell? Said Larry. The red-flecked eyes moved, focusing on the men. The corners of her mouth lifted, forming an obscene smile. One word slipped around the distended tongue. Revenge. She raised her red-mottled hands. The room's lights went out, and the two men felt their throats crushed by an unseen force. They coughed up blood, feeling cords wrapping around their necks before their awareness slipped into darkness. You said you found the bodies here in room 225? Asked the detective. Yes, sir, said the maid, shuddering. Two men, hanging by extension cords from the bar in that closet there. She pointed. Hey, say, isn't this the room where we found that murdered woman 1 year ago? An unknown assailant hung her. The maid nodded her head, squeezing her cleaning rag with both hands. Her name was Sally. He scratched his head. I forgot her last name. Her purse and body jewelry were missing, so we closed the case as a robbery homicide. The detective sighed. And now this. It was going to be a long evening. Thank you for listening. That's it.
Great. That was wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to try never to look into the closet in the next motel I'm staying in. For sure. All right. Thank you so much. And congratulations, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Jamie, I'm going to bring you back. Will you read the next story for us?
Sure. Is that People Are the Scariest?
Yes. And this is the winner for Team Best Dialogue. And the author is Monica Liu. So
All right.
take it away,
So,
Jamie.
People are the scariest. I never had many friends growing up. I was always more or less an outcast, shy, reserved, and clumsy with my words, until I moved to a new school. It was my second year of high school. I went to a boarding school. Naturally, people tend to get closer when they live together. I figured since nobody knew me, it could be a fresh start for my social life. I zipped up my gray jacket, hoping it can conceal my worry. I felt the pit of my stomach churn as the library came into view. Slowly, pushing open the door, cautiously peering around the noisy scene. People, 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 all in their separate groups, in their separate worlds, laughing, chattering. I wish I could be like them. But I chose to sit on a chair behind a bookshelf, taking out my computer to check my email. My fingers trembled as I started to pity myself, tears forming in my eyes. I covered my face with my palms and gasped in the air. I have never felt lonelier in my life, the hollow of my chest throbbing. I slowly removed my hands from my face. Then it happened. A friendly-looking girl smiled at me. I could barely make her out through my tears. Maybe she cares about how I feel. In an instant, her face contorted into a monster. Her expression was almost inhumanely cruel. It was like spring came, but then, in an instant, winter covered the landscape entirely. So are you the one? She asked. What? I replied. The one that was a bitch to my friends, she sneered. I could smell her floral perfume, her cheerful outfit, but I knew this was not her. I never did anything to you, I mumbled. Are you denying it? She smirked. I don't even know who you are, I said. Well, listen to this, because I have what you did on video. She held her phone 2 inches away from my face. The video was of me saying something I never said before. Or rather, the person that looked identical to me was speaking in a prideful way, criticizing and cursing about a girl named Charlotte with another girl in all ways imaginable. It was not me. This is not me, I exclaimed. I did not do this. And now you're denying it. This is you, you idiot. Are you blind? Now, I will show you the consequences. The girl's forehead opened up. A snake with the miniature face of a human woman opened its mouth, salivating. It opens its mouth so wide that its jaws muscles broke, revealing bone. It advanced towards me. I screamed for help, but the people suddenly all froze in their place and transformed into human-sized puppets. Was I going mad? I did not know. I grabbed my bag, pushed my way through the shelves and the girl, and dashed out of the building as fast as I could.
Great job. Monica, congratulations. People are indeed the scariest. Thank you, Jamie. Let's see. I am going to share with you next a video. Darren Silverman is going to read his story called The Ballad. And this was a runner-up in the adult category for Writer's Craft. Bear with me here. Get this going.
This is The Ballad by Darren Silverman. It was wet and cold in October, seasons changing so fast, Melody thought, with her 13th birthday only a few weeks away. 13, a bad luck number, but how else to become a teenager? To celebrate, she had ordered tickets to see Logan Richards, her favorite singer. He had thick, dark, wavy hair that hung in his face when he sang. Melody knew everything about him, including the fact that they shared the same eye color, gray, and they shared the same astrological sign, Scorpio, and that they even shared the same blood type, AB. Unlike Melody, Logan had tried to take his own life many times. He said in interviews that life was meant for spirits, not flesh, because spirits live forever. He said he would one day marry the goddess of water in a ceremony under the harvest moon. Now here it was, Halloween around the corner. Logan's show was going to be in a forest on the edge of a lake. The media mused that he was setting the stage for his last goodbye. Melody didn't know what to believe. Upon receiving her ticket, Melody came down with a sudden fever, perspiring in her sleep, dreaming about Logan Richards singing her favorite song, a ballad called Drown With Me. When the day of the concert finally arrived, Melody snuck out her bedroom window and took a bus to the show, though she could not stop shivering from fever. The orange moon was full above the spectral lake, forest trees edged with blush light, the stage hypnotic with flickering lamps. When Logan Richards stepped onto the stage, Melody already had tears of excitement in her eyes, tightening her scarf around her neck, fighting icy sweat and fluid in her lungs. The show began. Logan, wearing black leather pants and black sleeveless shirt, hair loose and wild round his sculpted face, looking fragile, skeletal, and beautiful, telling the audience he would sing only one song. Black clouds drifted across the sky, and he sang, holding long, otherworldly notes, as if ringing out his soul. Melody saw his gray eyes up close, felt the loneliness in his song. When Logan reached the aching wail that ended the ballad, the moon seemed to flash, making his skin translucent as he stepped backward, dipping into the lake, disappearing in moon-drenched rings of light, lowering into ripples, till his last wavy strand of hair slipped underneath. Everyone gasped, cheering. It was exactly what they imagined, until Logan Richards did not rise up. There was a commotion. His crew came running and diving in after him. Melody hugged herself, tightening her scarf like a noose of warmth. Liquid in her lungs, sweat freezing, moon blazing, woods all around, enclosing, claustrophobic, her throat bubbling, calling Logan in an airless rasp, sharing his blood, his eyes, his sign, his wish to drown. Singing and sinking, his hand seizing hers, taking her on her birthday to the bottom of the lake forever.
That was good.
That was great. Thank you, Darren, for making that video for us. Very intense. Wow. So next up, we have Miss Sophia Elliott. And Sophia is a runner-up for the teen category for being the overall best. Welcome, Sophia. And Sophia's story is called A Dance with Death.
He looked around the ballroom, smiling. It wasn't often he got to throw such grand parties, but it was quite the cause for celebration. Deciding it was time to start the festivities, he snapped his fingers. The entire ballroom seemed to spring to life. He moved through the scattered tables dotting the edges of the room, adorned with bouquets of lilies. The partygoers smiled at him, laughing at his jokes, waiting for the music to start. He walked to the corner of the room, to the empty stage, and clapped. The band began to play. Couples began to move to the dance floor, and the others clapped their hands in time to the music, a symphony of sounds unheard before. Then the party started. He noticed a woman walk through the door and look around, frowning. She wore a flowy jet-black dress that fell to her shoes. She must be looking for someone, he presumed, and walked towards her. What? She began to ask, but he interrupted before she could say another word. Welcome to the party, he said, bowing. A partygoer came up to give her a glass of champagne. She looked at the glass in her hand, then thanked him cautiously and moved to a table nearby, sitting down and staring at her drink. She looked lonely. Maybe she didn't have a date? He didn't want anybody to be alone this fine evening. He walked over to her, careful to wind around the partygoers. May I have this dance? He asked her, smiling. She nodded, standing up and moved to the dance floor. He reached for her arm, and when they began a slow waltz, he realized why she was there. He expected her presence, but shrugged off his worry. There wasn't anything he could do. All the partygoers were the last of surviving humanity he had taken care of. He was a necromancer, a wizard of sorts, and the bodies around him were those that he controlled. She had come to collect all their souls at his party. A bony hand brushed his shoulder, a skeleton thanking him for the ball. He saw her look at it sadly. As they moved throughout the room, he tried to chat with her to distract her from the half-charred bodies and fancy dresses. After all, it wasn't often that you got the chance to dance with death.
That was great. Wonderful. Thank you, Sophia. Excellent job. All right. Yay. So I'm going to read the next story for you all. And this is by Lauren Napa. And this is a runner-up in the adult category for the most original. And it's called The Ides of October. On the Ides of October, while traveling through an unheard-of village in a remote part of Romania, Serafina and her friend stopped at a curio shop aptly named Abracadabra Obscura to escape a bout of snow. A taxidermal owl silently greeted them from a shelf as they shook off the flakes. The darkly furnished shop smelled of old paper, leather, and faint cat urine. There were 2 oversized yellow candles, dripping hot wax onto saucers filled to the brim. While rummaging the back of the shop, Serafina found a curious book, laden with ancient dust. She blew off the silt. The book was the color of dry, crushed leaves, its cover revealing what looked like the number 2 surrounded by tiny, dulled rubies. The symbols are evil, said Victoria, taking a step back. This is exactly what's needed for our research, she replied, fingering her crucifix. I don't believe you can get any more folkloric than this. Just then the keeper stepped in, his bleak smile addressing the customers. He had a complexion of cherry bark, a parrot nose, and was hollow-cheeked. His shabby clothes hung on him. Held up by raw-boned shoulders, he lumbered over, one leg shorter than the other, looking annoyed. The bluster of frigid wind blew in, snapping the shop's door open, sprinkling everyone with snowflakes which prickled their skin. I see you found the Vi, he said, edging closer. He didn't bother to shut the door, but stared hauntingly as a torrid galaxy swirled within each pupil. After a moment of dead quiet, he said, "I will let you have it for cheap. It's lived here way too long." Against the hard-nosed warning of her schoolmate, Serafina made the purchase. "It's late. There's an inn at the corner that's open all night. You girls can stay there. It's comfortable and safe from marauders. Leave your car here. Don't read the book in the hours of the dark when the moon puts down the red sun," he said, practically shoving them out the door. They heard his guffaws over the tinkling of bells while hanging the closed sign, locking the door behind them. "Serafina, are you mad? That guy's a creep," said Victoria. "What's up with the red sun thingy he talked about?" "Who cares? I can't wait to peruse this. Let's get a room. I'm so hungry I could eat my shoes." In the hours of the darkened moon, while Victoria slept, Serafina unbound the Vi beside the flickering light of a bent candle. Mists of violet symbols rose from its pages, whirling bedevilments. A ghosted hand garroted her neck before she could scream, and stole her breath. The beast emerged amidst the sorcery and swallowed her soul, whisking her flesh to the ghosts of hell. After the red sun defeated the moon, Victoria awoke to the odor of burnt sulfur. On the desk was a scintillating Vi, flashing sparks of violet, and, aside it, a burnt hand with a singed crucifix. And that was The Ides of October by Lauren Napa. Thanks, Lauren. And the next we're going to have is called The Voices. And this is the winner of the scariest story in the teen category. And Jamie, thank you for reading this for us.
All right. The Voices. The Voices. Ever since I was little, I would get these weird voices in my head telling me to do something or else I would die. I knew it was just my mind tricking myself, but I always followed what they told me to do as it was never anything bad. Turn the light off and on 4 times or else you're dead. The voices repeated in my head when I left the bathroom. Off, on, off, on, off, on, off, on. I'm safe. It was not until I got older when the voices started to concern me. I got punished every time I didn't do something they commanded. Either a bad grade on a test or my alarm not going off, but something always happened. I didn't care much about the punishment because I already wasn't doing well in school and more sleep was always needed. The commands got worse and so did the punishments. An angry young girl's voice yelled violently into my ear that I cut off before I heard her command. La 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 la. I blocked her out with the sound of my tongue hitting the roof of my mouth. That night, there was no way I would sleep. I was shivering profusely and didn't have anything but negative thoughts going through my brain. The clock claimed to be 4 a.m. when I finally gained a little bit of sleep, but I was shortly woken up when I saw a shadow pass by my door. Paranoid, I wouldn't take my eyes off of the door. I saw it widen, followed by a little girl walking into my room. She turned my light off, on, off, on, off, on, off, on. She's safe. But I wasn't. Sleep deprived, scared, and nauseous, I screamed for help, but it was silent. I tried to move, but I couldn't. I was helpless, and the voices wouldn't shut up. Screaming in one ear and whispering in the other, I was going insane. The light turned off, on, off, on, off, on, off, on. She came closer. The door opened, and suddenly 3 more people surrounded her. One boy who looked around 5'1", a taller man with glasses, and a girl that looked like the twin of the first one. The voices, I thought, they had come to life. You didn't follow what we told, the first girl spoke with her scratchy voice. I didn't think it was that big of a deal, I said, shivering. The boys looked at each other in a way where they were talking without speaking. It was a look of disappointment. The first twin explained with nails on a chalkboard, "We are here to help you." I didn't believe her for 1 second. "Kill your mom," the nails said, "or it's you who dies." My shivering became still. I looked at my body from what I guessed was life after death. Dead. I was on, then off. It wasn't me who killed myself, but it was the voices.
Wow, that was great. And I failed to say the author's name before. It's Janie Pakulski. And that was The Voices, the teen scariest winner. Great. Thank you for reading that, Jamie. All right. So we have a video next for everybody. Lipstick. The story is called Lipstick. The author is Colleen Heffley, and she is the winner in the adult category for Best Writer's Craft. Here we go.
I'm Colleen Heffley, and this is my story, Lipstick. Applying lipstick to a corpse takes practice, he thought as he bent over her body. Maybelline was his favorite. It went on smoothly. But he was using Revlon because it makes her special shade. An accomplished artist at following the delicate contour of the lips, he rarely left a smudge. But lately, his hands trembled and he cursed under his breath. She was what? Only the third one in the last 4 months? He was already looking forward to number 4. Not that long ago, he dreamed of becoming a Hollywood makeup artist. But after doors slammed in his face, he found himself prowling the streets of La La Land. Just another disillusioned wannabe, desperate for that one chance to make a name in Tinseltown. 2 months later, there was still no number 4. Time for a hunt. It was after midnight when he spotted her. Like a predictable scene from a B movie, she was fumbling for her car keys when he nabbed his ivory-skinned beauty. In her drunken state, she barely fought back. He was almost disappointed it was so easy. Duct tape and zip ties held her as he stopped by the funeral parlor to grab his kit. "Hope you like Maybelline," he sneered. The secluded canyon he picked out earlier wasn't far. Gently laying her at the bottom of the hideaway, he knelt beside her and smiled. This one he could keep. No hearses arriving to take her to some absurd funeral where mourners only go there for the free food. Cradling her face, he decided beforehand that knives or strangulation were out. He coveted her unblemished form. Pulling the duct tape from her lips, he grinned when he saw no tape residue. He reached for his funnel and a large bottle of vodka. Parting her lips, he poured slowly, intermittently, so she wouldn't gag. Satisfied, he reached in his pocket, then slipped a small capsule into her mouth, followed by one last round of vodka. Perfect. Her soul would be gone in seconds, and her body would remain. The blood-red shade of Maybelline rolled on smoothly and matched perfectly with her crimson sweater. But it was just a tad too thick. He fumbled around in his makeup kit. Where's my blotting paper? He'd have to use his own lips to blot hers. Fancying himself Prince Charming, he knelt to kiss his sleeping beauty, parting his lips slightly as his met hers. As they pressed together, he suddenly felt her tongue push something into his mouth. Jumping back, he tried to spit it out. Too late. Cyanide works its magic in seconds. She stood up, pulled a paper from her bra, and blotted her lips with it. Then she curled her tongue around each fang to check for smudges. Happy, she reached for his cell phone. Got another one in the ravine just south of the Hollywood sign. I've got the vodka and the Bloody Marys. Tell the girls to bring the cheese and crackers. Cheers.
That was great. Colleen, I don't know if you're watching, but great video. I know you had a lot of fun making that too. And that was Colleen Huffley's Lipstick. So the next story, the author's not able to join us. And we're going to have Jamie Baker read for us. This is the winner of the teen category Best Writer's Craft. And it is Untitled, and it's by Riley Aiken. Take it away, Jamie.
All right. We had lived here for about 5 years now, my mom, sister, and me, since 2091. We were assigned the job of growing trees, ones that were genetically engineered to withstand the toxic Mars environment, part of the efforts to make this planet more sustainable to human life. We had moved into a pod in a valley surrounded by impossibly tall, dark mountains. Now, this valley was nothing like Earth. It constantly reminded settlers that they were millions of miles from home. No one ever wanted to go anywhere near those blood-red mountains, especially after the incident that happened near them a month back when my sister had disappeared. I walked past the adamant trees, looking up at the land towering to the very top of the atmosphere through the fog that filtered between them. I noticed a red cloud not beyond the mountains. Deciding to warn her about the incoming dust storm, I turned on my heel to head back to the pod where I had last seen her. "Mom," I called, slicing through the deafening silence. No answer. "Mom!" Louder this time, my voice rang through the deserted orchard. Again, the only response was my own echo bouncing off the trees. I groaned, starting to wander through the valley, snaking between the trees, searching for her. Minutes slowly passed, fog seeping from the mountains, creeping into the atmosphere around me. Glancing back at the blood-stained cliffs, I saw the dust cloud much closer and quickened my pace. I called out for my mom a few more times, becoming more frantic. My footsteps echoed as I weaved through the orchard. I had hoped to avoid the ominous cave on the north side of the valley where my sister is said to have disappeared, but after a while, it was the only place left to search. I sighed, turning around and creeping toward the dark hole. I entered the cave, slowly making my way through the darkness. Just as the blackness was too thick to navigate through, the jagged walls produced a tiny green crystal with a soft glow. I could feel a presence shifting around me, a frigid, sinister feeling that I was being watched. I shook it off as more crystals appeared, illuminating the room until I was surrounded by a ghostly, blinding green light. There were two unconscious figures, once I recognized as my mom, the other familiar, but I couldn't pinpoint from where. I rushed over to wake her up, noticing a ghostly, transparent glow about her, and glancing over, I saw the other figure had a much more distinct fluorescence. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and before I could turn around, I felt that icy presence right behind me. Aghast, I turned around. The figure was in front of me, a giant shadow looming over me, ready to pounce. Before I knew it, everything went black, but not before I realized the other figure was my sister.
Great job. I love how that mixes a little science fiction in with the scary horror faction. gosh, let's see. I think we have just 4 stories left. And the next one is the teen winner of the overall best. And actually this one ran away with all the categories, so we just listed it as overall best. I'm sorry that the author can't be with us today, but this is Stephanie Peterson with The Lonely Cabin.
Hi there, my name is Steph Peterson, and this is my ghost story called The Lonely Cabin. 31 days. 31 days since the snow began to fall. 31 days inside this cabin in the middle of nowhere. Nobody to talk to but the ghosts of forgotten freedom. It had been 312 days since I met Jay in the lobby of my office building, him going up to the highest floor in the building, me to the 4th. He approached me and said he wanted to have dinner. That night I learned he was not only one of the most successful businessmen in the city, but also shared a dream of escaping life for one away from everything. After that night, we were inseparable. It had been 50 days since Jay disappeared to the modest cabin where we'd live. We faked a crime for the tabloids to eat up, allowing us to throw stress out of our lives. I would play the part of the frantic girlfriend, begging for his return. The public ate it up, giving us new titles: Kidnapped Jay and Poor Mallory. Little did they know, we were giving ourselves new names, ours immortalized in fake IDs and passports. It had been 38 days since I set foot in our secluded cabin, Jay seeing me for the first time as Carrie, and me seeing him for the first time as Michael. It had been 36 days since we knew we made a mistake. After seeing the red-soaked figure of the bleeding girl on our floor, we knew we had to get out. We actually thought of calling the authorities at first, but the body had disappeared on second glance. That was the beginning of hourly visions of murder victims of the past that terrified us, alone in the middle of nowhere. It had been 31 days since the snow began to fall and Jay set out to find help. He didn't know where he was going or what he was looking for, but he left me deserted. It had been 20 days since I thought to go find him. I walked out the door, but the step off the porch brought me right back to the living room. After many attempts, I realized I was trapped here until someone could save me. I tried going out other doors and windows to the same result. I tried calling someone, but the snow blocked the signal. I tried anything and everything I could think of. I almost gave up hope, but in a final act of desperation, I walked up to one of the bodies and reached out to touch it. I was surprised that it didn't disappear, and my curiosity heightened. I brushed the hair back. I never felt a sense of dread stronger, or the feeling that I was stuck forever with nobody looking for me, than in the moment I saw it had my face. Thanks for listening.
So next we have someone who's been waiting backstage a long time and to read live. And this is the winner of the Adult Scariest category. And Ms. Judith Guarnara will read her story, The Face in the Basement. Welcome, Judith.
Thank you, Carrie. Jose awoke, sweat prickling under his arms. He couldn't remember his dreams, but his eyes widened when he noticed angry-looking blisters on his hands. After hastily departing their previous home, Jose and Lucilla had finally begun to hope. Perhaps they could build a new life together, put the past behind them, until a ghoulish face appeared on their dingy gray basement wall. Lucilla fled to her mother. She swore she wouldn't set foot in the house until he dispatched the face back to where it had come from. That night, Jose's bed, empty of the woman he loved, denied him sleep. Each time his lids drooped, rustling, scraping sounds pulled him back. Next morning, determined to expedite Lucilla's return, he descended to the basement, a pickaxe swinging by his side. Jose stood, mesmerized by the evil face. Behind contorted features, he caught a glimpse of something familiar. He grabbed the axe, swinging again and again until it slid from his blister's hand and flew across the floor. Every vestige of the face was gone. Jose's heart lifted. He dragged a bag of cement to the wheelbarrow and prepared the concrete. Hopeful, Lucilla could now forget the horror that had marred their happiness. He repaired the wall. An hour later, wiping sweat from his brow, he surveyed his work. The wall looked as smooth as his freshly shaven face. He made the sign of the cross. Though anxious for his wife to return, he resisted calling her. Instinct told him to give the wall a day to set before he shared the news. The next day, he descended the stairs with a spring in his step. At the bottom, suddenly nervous, he hesitated. The angry, spite-filled face no longer marred the surface. Jose did a little happy dance until the light suspended by a wire above his head began to spin faster and faster. An eerie wail intensified until it filled the room. The walls moved in on him. The same ghoulish face stared back at him from the wall. An eerie wail erupted from the gaping mouth. Suddenly cold, he gasped, and his breath seemed to catch in a freeze frame above his head. His knees shook. He grabbed his chest as though to keep his heart from bursting. Gotta get out of here, but his feet ignored him. Jose looked down to see fresh concrete swirling around his shoes. He must move before it hardened, but his fear immobilized him. A chiming doorbell snapped him from his imprisonment. The wall ceased. The face disappeared. A dream? Willing his feet to move, he stumbled up the stairs and yanked the door open. A man, clad in shabby, stained clothing, stood, his back to the door. When he pivoted, Jose gasped and sank to his knees. The features of the one slightly familiar face came into focus. The past he and Lucilla had fled had followed them. The face contorted, the mouth opened, and emitted a primordial scream. Thank you.
That was great, Judith. The Face in the Basement, adult scariest for 2021. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and have a gentleman who also has been waiting a long time to read his story. And Mr. Paul Gellis is, his story is the winner of the most original for adult. So let's have you on here, Paul, which is called The Poor Herbert Ghost Story. Welcome, Paul, and thank you for waiting all this time to read.
Yeah, thank you very much, Carrie, for organizing all this. My story is called Poor Herbert. I couldn't believe it, but there it was, plain as day. The large headline in Solvang's newspaper, the Naidor Weekly, dated November 1st, 1921. Horrific accident and flood, wagon overturned on Alamo Pintado Creek, several injured, one dead. I pinched myself to make sure I wasn't dreaming as I left the archive room of the Solvang Library. I'd found the grave 4 days earlier. Ever since moving on to the family farm a few years ago, my dog Jezebel has started barking along the creek 200 yards below where the accident had occurred 100 years ago. One night she kept yelping and yelping. Finally, I went out and found her furiously digging away. And that's when I saw something gleaming in the moonlight, a smooth stone. I pushed the dirt to one side and with my handkerchief wiped away the remaining dust. The inscription read, Herbert Krigsvassen, November 30th, 1917 to October 31st, 1921. Here would lie our dear boy, had he been found. I imagine my great-grandparents Otto and Freya and their two surviving children, my grandfather Magnus and his brother Alfred, standing around the gravesite, perhaps with some other members of the newly formed Danish community of Solvang, silent tears falling by the empty grave. I pulled out the faded black and white photo from my desk drawer, studying the faces of Otto, Carla, Magnus, Alfred, and little Herbert as they sat expressionless in front of the Solvang Hotel. It was true what some families said. I was the spitting image of Otto, my great-grandfather and namesake, the person who I'd been named after. I'd heard the story of the accident many times growing up, how the rains came on fast that day, how no one had seen Alamo Pintado Creek swell, how the wagon was halfway across when the flash flood happened. Magnus and Alfred yelling and whipping the horses to no avail. The river of water flipping Magnus under the wagon, Freya trapped in overgrowth as the creek whipped them downstream. Her husband Emil hitting his head on a rock, and poor little Herbie ripped away by the current, never to be seen again. After finding the gravesite, I'd researched the accident. I'd found the 1921 news clip and the old family photograph, again marveling at the similarities between the face of Otto, my great-grandfather, and my now 45-year-old face. It could have been a picture of me staring out from that photograph 100 years ago. Incredible that tomorrow, Halloween, it would be exactly 100 years since the accident. With that in mind, I went back to the gravesite. I was polishing the gravestone when Jezebel barked and then started growling hard. That's when I saw it, a specter in the moonlight, the silvery shade of a small boy, not 5 years old, standing on the other side of the grave. "Father, Father," he whispered, his otherworldly voice coming as if from the grave. "You've come back for me. You've come back for me." I crossed myself. Voice wavering, I told him, "Oh, Herbert, you poor child. It's not your father Otto. I'm Otto, your grandnephew." Thank you, and happy Halloween. Uh-oh. Am I still live?
Sorry, Paul. Just putting you through a little horror. My mouse wasn't working. That was fantastic. I love all your local history touches. Thank you for giving the library a archives room.
Yes. Major kudos to you, Carrie. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is the winner of the most original category for the teens. And this is Alexander Grineer with his story, The Ghost Writer.
Hello, my name is Alexander Grineer, and I'm a sophomore at Dunn School. The story I submitted to the Solvang Valley Library competition is titled The Ghost Writer. I'll now begin reading my story. My English teacher, Mr. Sutton, gave our class a challenge. In 500 words or less, write a ghost story. You'll be submitting your stories to the Toliga Valley Ghost Story competition. Excuse me, Mr. Sutton, interjected a student, Simona. Your challenge is easy. What was that? Questioned Mr. Sutton as he cupped his hand to his ear and leaned towards Simona. I can't hear you. I swear there's something in my ear. We all thought Mr. Sutton was a nutter. The challenge wasn't easy for me. I spent the rest of the class seeking solace in an article about the Algerian War on Wikipedia. My efforts to write a ghost story over the following days were also not successful. It eventually came down to the last day, yet still I procrastinated. At 9:03 p.m., I glanced at my watch. Scheisse, I cursed. Less than an hour. Opening my computer, I tried in vain to resist the urge to open Wikipedia. One article on the Cuban Revolution later, I stopped myself and began to work on my ghost story. No story ideas came, so I began to rage. I sprung up from my chair and grabbed my sword. Thrusting my sword forward into the open air in front of me, I thought I heard an ouch. You can't kill a ghost, jackass, grumbled the voice. Who's there? I can't see anyone. Of course you can't. Ghosts are invisible. A ghost? Hey, why don't you ghost write my story for me? You aren't funny. Please, I need a good story for Mr. Sutton's English class. Mr. Sutton? Asked the ghost, dumbfounded. I was a student of his once. I died after he pelted me with a dictionary. I guess I'm lucky. Mr. Sutton only throws small books at me. I'll help you with the story. We victims of Mr. Sutton need to stick together. My ghosts begin a story about an infamous ghost, the Phantom Toe. The Phantom Toe used to be a friend of mine, actually, explained the ghost. I would have him help too, except he's been ghosting me lately. The story began years ago when Mr. Sutton was himself a student. Mr. Sutton had decided to check out Norton's Anthology of English Literature from the library. As he walked towards the checkout counter, he glanced at the future Mrs. Sutton. Gawking, he slipped and dropped the colossus of a book on his little toe, completely severing the toe. The toe died that day and became a ghost, with a vengeance. The toe blamed Mr. Sutton for the unfortunate accident and swore he would do all he could to torment him. So when Mr. Sutton became an English teacher, the phantom toe saw it as an opportunity to avenge himself by torturing Mr. Sutton as he taught the class. "What did the phantom toe do to torment Mr. Sutton?" I asked the ghost. "Mr. Sutton isn't really hard of hearing. That's just the phantom toe lodging himself in Mr. Sutton's ear." The end. It was a strange story, not very scary, but I hope it was maybe a little bit funny, a little bit of a change from the usual ghost story. Thank you for this opportunity to submit a story to this competition. I appreciate it and had a lot of fun writing my story. Thank you.
That was great. That was a lot of fun. I'm going to get you back on here, Jamie. And we're going to say goodbye to everybody. And I want to thank the judges again. And I thank all you readers who joined us today. And that was so much fun to hear you live. And I really hope that next year we'll be able to have a live reading in an actual space all together. It is so much fun to hear everything read aloud. So thank you again. Congratulations to every single person who submitted to our challenge. Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody.